we got fancy stuff and everything. Yeah, everybody, welcome to Let's Talk About my new live to tape YouTube series. This is only the second episode about films, television shows, and related nonsense. All right, with that out of the way, tonight I am fortunate enough to have a fantastic guest host return for a second engagement. My good friend Bryan from Dragon Movie Guy. How you doing, my friend?
Time number two, the second number two, the second. Yes, I'm very well, thank you.
But given that it's only been two Let's Talk Abouts, and this is the second, and you were there at the first when we were talking about Zack Snyder's Justice League, this is
it was
your
a
second
long, hard
engagement.
slog, yes.
Dear Lord, and that was 2 attempts.
Yeah.
With any luck, this will be a little tighter, a little cleaner.
Yes, well, it absolutely is. And in fact, I just watched A Quiet Place for the first time today. So actually, I watched it twice. So.
All right, my friend, on that note, I'm gonna kick you off the script. I'm gonna take over. I'm taking the show over. And let's I'm gonna get into our show tonight, what we're actually here for. All right, 1 second, my friend. Tonight, Bryan and I will be discussing A Quiet Place, starring John Krasinski, Emily Blunt, Noah Jupe, and Millicent Simmonds. Here's the log line from IMDb. In this post-apocalyptic world, a family is forced to live in silence while hiding from monsters with ultra-sensitive hearing. It was directed by John Krasinski, who also shared screenplay credits with the writing partners Bryan Woods and Scott Beck. Now, as far as the ideological ingredients on the reframe stamp, I would say that's a no. Not 100% sure, but I don't believe they earned a reframe stamp. Is it union made? Yes, it is. Would it earn a Bechdel? Did it pass the Bechdel stamp? Or did it pass the Bechdel test? Sure, I guess, kind of. The very final scene, maybe. So yeah, you know what? We'll give it a pass, unless anyone's kind of going, wait, what? That makes no sense. What else do we got here? Is there any class consciousness? No. Anyway, so I think that's about it as far as this sort of thing goes. Let's. I think it is. I think it's time to bring my good friend Bryan back. How can you tell it's the first time I've done this show, this format? It's blah 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 blah. Here, let me try that again. How do you know there might be a couple of edits for tomorrow? All right. Okie doke. Let's jump in. First thoughts. What are your first thoughts, Bryan?
Well, I just watched this twice this afternoon because somehow I didn't get to see this when it came out in theaters.
Me too.
2018.
What the heck, eh?
I'm a huge John Krasinski fan. I've watched all 8 or 9 seasons of The Office. I've not seen him take over Jack Ryan, but obviously he and Emily Blunt are married in real life. I just have this feeling that this is sort of one of those let's play the quiet game home things that somehow morphed into, what if the quiet game turned into A Quiet Place and we can work together, low-cost movie, just do good storytelling, boom. And then now we're getting a sequel coming out on Friday in a couple days here.
Yeah. I you know what? The best I can say right now, Bryan, is I think that is the best first 10 minutes. We'll talk about the rest of the film. This is not foreshadowing on what I think about the rest of the film. I'm just talking about right now. The first 10 minutes is the best first 10 minutes I've seen in a long time. the way it sets up the rules and the stakes and everything, it ranks up there with some of the best movies. And this is working with children, that they're able to deliver that. It was really impressive. I was like, I'm in it.
Yeah, and all of the camera angles, the reveals they did, when the daughter kind of walks
you're
past.
Jumping ahead.
Yeah.
You're jumping ahead. We'll get into that, man. We'll get into it. You've had your turn. You'll get another turn.
Fine.
Here, for those folks who maybe have stumbled on this, they haven't seen it yet. Do you think it's worth their time? Yay or nay?
Absolutely. Yes.
Ditto. Couldn't agree more. Yeah. Now there's your foreshadowing, everyone. Great first 10 minutes, and I think it's all worth your time. All right. Okay. Let's talk about the craft. What did you think about the look, the feel of it? Like, it all lends towards storytelling. It all lends towards, the meaning. But as far as the nuts and bolts of this film went, what did you think of its cinematography, its sound, its soundtrack? Although I think there's really like a song.
Yeah, there's the one song in the middle. As far as the cinematography on this, I thought was really well done. It was pretty basically done. It sort of had lots of shadows, a lot of night shots, a lot of longer takes to kind of build the suspense. I loved how they did it, and the camera's very purposeful. Like we pan around, especially in the first 10 minutes. We're following in. There's a lot of ground level shots where you're seeing the camera kind of looking up and towards the light, kind of coming towards the camera as the kids and as the parents are kind of walking through what turns out to be a drugstore, and they're trying to get some medication and yada yada yada. And just the reveals that John Krasinski does, because John Krasinski directed this film as well as starring in the film. Just the reveal. We see his daughter walk past camera, and we can see her have the cochlear implant on the side of her head. So, as a quick reveal, and then as that happens, and it happens with a lot of this film, when she's sort of the point of view character, the sound goes completely out. So we get a sense of what she's not hearing, as the case may be. So I really liked, any film that can use silence, any film that knows what it wants to do, which this film does exactly. It knows exactly how it wants to tell the story, and exactly what the story is. And anytime you can get that, I think you're getting the makings of a really good story.
Yeah. I was super impressed with let's just talking about the soundscape itself and the cinematography, and even right down to costume, or heck, they're always walking around in bare feet. Always, you see that first couple of shots of their youngest kid and folks, just in case you're not sure, you haven't heard this before, we are in the spoiler zone.
Bum, bum, bum.
Bum, bum, bum. We're in the spoiler zone, folks, just in case you haven't figured that out already. Okay, those first couple of shots, like you're saying, ground level, we're seeing half of a child, bare feet, running on the balls of his feet. Now, I don't know about you, but I grew up in a two-story home, and the old man was forever, quit thumping around, because of course it's a cheap two-story home. Every heel strike you can hear everywhere else. And so all I'm thinking is, oh my goodness, I know that's what that's for. That's keep the old man from getting on your ass. Oh wait, no, it's kind of a horror movie. It's so the monsters don't come and get you. But their commitment in every frame, in every moment that you hear, and it's not like you're hearing silence. You're just not hearing them. It's this weird sound negative space, and their ability to use that negative space, just like as you say, that purposeful first few shots where we're really not seeing them. The focus isn't on them. It's where where there is no light. You know, it's all that silhouetted thing, just like you hear it because you don't hear it. Does that make any sense? Do you know what I'm trying to say there?
Yeah, it is a lot of negative space. And, you know, if you think about how most films are built in terms of background music and then dialogue, and then somewhere in the middle, the Foley experts doing all the footsteps. But usually all of those Foley experts, you know, where you hear the footsteps or where you hear someone breathing or a door opening, usually those are always sort of buried in the background and with the mix with the rest of the film. And in this film, all of those Foley experts that do all the sound effects, and I don't know how it was mixed, whether it was like Dolby 5.1 or Dolby Atmos or Dolby 7.1, however they designed it, they definitely designed it.
Going through my 2 Google Max speakers at home.
Yeah.
Because I didn't see it in the theater.
Yeah, I just watched it on my home TV now today. But you could definitely tell that they took a lot of time and care bringing up the sound. And even, I think, it felt a little bit too like they were recording whatever the sounds were. However they were recording the sound effects for the ADR, for all of that stuff, it sort of felt too like they were taking care to put the mic close to the sound if the camera was close to the sound or farther away. Like it seemed like this is one of those films where they took a lot of care with the sound design. You know, it's like you think about like a really bad kung fu movie where you just hear like a punch sound effect and the camera's from far away, but the punch sounds like it's right up next to the mic. It's just poorly done, poorly timed. Like a bad dub sort of thing. That's the exact opposite of what this film is. This film, they did so much good care with the sound design, the sound editing. You know, there's times where you hear the wind coming through. There's times where you don't hear the wind. A lot of the stuff too with the daughter who's deaf, who's hearing impaired, they bring the sound, the ambient sound down to nothing. A lot of times when we're seeing things from her point of view, and then as it kind of goes back to the larger picture, we get the sound slowly coming back in. Which
leans into that tension building, like their ability to use sound to add tension. You know, to have us fear for every character on screen. Yeah.
Yeah. And just a lot of the regular tropes that you get with less of a horror. This is more of a suspense film. A lot of the jump scare type stuff, they do very well, and that matches in with the sound as well. John Krasinski did a really good job kind of blending that in, but also telling a very coherent story from beginning to end.
What did you think of it was something that struck me as we were watching. That soft kind of, like, it felt fall. Even though we did see greenery, it felt that late summer, maybe even Indian summer, you know, that kind of warm, but, you know, you feel like winter's coming. You know, the angle of the light, and again, I think a lot of times when they're outside, except for a couple of shots, a lot of times they were, again, backlit by the sun, but it had a nice feel to it, like that there were, you know, it's one of those things. But I'm wondering what you thought about that, or did you notice it, or is it more just like you said earlier before, Brian, it's practical, solid cinematography?
Well, you know, when you do it right, it's harder to notice because everything blends together so well. The first 10 minutes of the film takes place 89 days after whatever, the aliens land or whatever. It doesn't really say, it just says day 89, that first 10 minutes. And then when we go to day 471. Yeah.
And then 472. Like it's a film that takes place over like 2 days.
A year and a half or whatever. So yeah.
But a year and a half later, yeah.
Yeah. So it's a year and a half later. If you look at Emily Blunt being pregnant, she's doing all sorts of self-care in terms of, you know, writing down her blood pressure and everything. on the calendar it says October 3rd.
Okay,
So anyway, so that would mean early fall, late summer. And then if you subtract the 479 days, that would mean, or the 472 days, that would mean that they landed on June 16th of the previous year.
Oh, okay.
And then, so it'd be like summer, fall, when all that stuff's happening.
Okay. Okay. Anything you wanted to say about the production design, the sets and everything? I do have a couple of notes, but I was wondering what you thought about. For those who don't know, it's set for the most part on a farm and then out in the woods beyond the farm.
Yes.
And it looked, for some reason, I have it in my brain that it was New England somewhere, but I suspect it's probably like trying to be, well, I believe it was shot in New York, state of New York, but it's got it has a northeastern feel to it. Oh, maybe I was just right. Sorry. Anyway, continue.
Watching the end of the credits, it did say that it was shot in a lot of smaller towns in New York, which, unless it was on Long Island, I'm guessing was upstate New York somewhere. So, sort of that northern small farm town. We see them on the main street of their small town when they go to the pharmacy at the beginning, and then, most of the rest of the film was taking place on their one farm, and then some few excursions out into the woods and into a river. But I really like the design of it overall. I thought it was really clearly done, really clearly set up. The by the time we get to the end of the film, the geography of the farm and where everything is pretty clear. And so when things are if you're watching, some of the characters are far away or they're observing things, you have a really good idea in your head of how far the characters are supposed to be from each other.
Yeah, and again, in a film that, in a way, it's almost like part one, set up, like a little prologue, establishing what's the horror, and then here is their lives now, and then the second half of the film is just, and this is where it goes to, that they're able to do that when there are actually, for a place, the thing's set in one location, there are actually a lot of locations. And they aren't, and then I'll just walk from this house to that house and blah, blah, blah. You don't get sound cues to tell you where you are. Like, unless you're out in the woods, you don't get, there's so many things you don't get, and that they're able to establish that. You're absolutely right. Like, there is a strength in the design, again, back to the cinematography, the soundscape and everything. The one thing I did, and I wasn't quite like the house, and this is maybe, although this might get into some of the meaning thing and that I picked up, was the house seemed almost a stereotype of every 40s, 50s ideal of the big sprawling farmhouse. Now, at least at the beginning of the movie, they had 3 kids. And then at the end of the movie, they had 3 kids. So maybe you need a big sprawling farmhouse. But do you know what I mean? Like, that house was huge. And even when they went into rooms that they obviously didn't go in very often, memories, also going up and down stairs is no longer a thing in this world. You got to be very careful about wherever you move. But I just felt it was like, wow, that's a vintage bed that, do you know what I mean? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, even the pictures on it all had a kind of vintagey, almost kitschy vibe that I was like, sort of, this is from a different time, although it's clearly in our time.
Yes. I mean, clearly, I think that the design of the farmhouse was, very older. It didn't look like a wealthy family's farmhouse, but it also didn't look like a poor
Peasants.
Family's farmhouse. So it definitely had whatever that the aesthetic of that middle class farmer. Clearly a smaller farm. This wasn't some sort of huge middle of Iowa cornfield sort of thing where there's 180 acres or whatever. This was clearly a smaller, and you get the rolling landscape of upstate New York and all the trees surrounding it. I think also too, part
if the
of it
guy
is,
had a section, I'd be blown away.
Yeah, and part of it too is I think the idea of having smaller farms, so it's still a rural area, but there's those times when we see the the pyre fires being lit, just so that people know that they're that they're safe and
just
that there's
saying
others
that they're
out there.
alive.
But the fact that we're able to see them in the not too far distance just goes to show how relatively small these farms are. That these are not huge sprawling complexes. These are more family-style, family-sized farms.
Out of the 80s. The farms that John Cougar Mellencamp would sing about.
Hey, I'm a suburbs kid, so I've never lived on a farm. But yeah, clearly these are more family-sized, like not industrial strength farms.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's actually kind of and you know what? I'm going to save this comment for later. But okay, at least I've got something percolating in my brain. Much like yourself, Bryan, I saw this today. I saw this a few hours ago, and then I'm like, okay, let's get the show ready. Because as you know, we pulled this thing out of our ASS, 2 days ago? It's like, hey, do you want to do this? Somebody else had mentioned it to me, and then I was like, what if Bryan wants to do this? And we're doing it in a matter of days.
Always up for the challenge.
Exactly. All right, well, let's talk about the story. For myself, yes, every film you have to suspend disbelief, and in this one there are a couple of you gotta cut a film some slack. If you spend the whole film watching it and not being in it, allowing giving the director some slack just so that they can put you in a world, no film survives. That said, I did find a couple it's like, wow, they have a lot of electricity, so why do they have a lantern with fire? That doesn't make any sense to me at all. Because holy crap, they had a lot of electricity. I'm not even sure how they were generating.
Yeah, I wasn't 100% sure there either. However, if we're gonna go with the fact that John Krasinski is gonna build a command center with all kinds of TVs, and he's gonna be able to try and fix the cochlear implants, I'm assuming just based off of that technical skill, just his either just his resourcefulness or his previous life as an engineer of some kind, that he would be able to find generators with
that
power,
is not
power.
No, that is not the thing I'm questioning at all. Like I totally get it. I think that would be, if I was in a bind like that, I'd be like, how can I get power? How can I make electrical crap go? What I was more thinking is there's a minor plot point, but what may be minor, but I think is really important. It kind of emphasizes let's say the story. And folks, again, I'm more just starting from what I find is a comically interesting, let's call it a whole, for lack of a better phrase, in what is a solid story. It keeps your attention for 90 minutes. That said, there's this plot point where one of the kids knocks over a Coleman lantern, and this place has electricity coming out the wazoo. Every night they light their whole compound. It's lit with electric bulbs, so it's like, why is there a flame here when they don't need a flame? that was, and there was a couple other points like that, but you know what? I get why they had to have the moment, because they needed that. They needed to remind us that there may be, it's that another reminder of the tension within the home after the first 10 minutes of horror, when their youngest is taken by one of these creatures, spoilers, folks. Anyway, what did you think of the story? Never mind my whining about why is there fire there?
Well,
what did you think about the story?
Well, I think it kind of goes it kind of goes hand in hand too, because I actually thought that was a purposeful choice, because later when we see the aliens come in, we see that they have the ability to disrupt power fields, almost as if there's an EMP type effect where they can knock out power. So rather than just relying on whatever their electrical power is, if you're teaching your kids
how to, power goes out, you better have an option.
Yes. So and if you're teaching your kids how to survive in a world where you can't speak, and you teach them to be prepared. They're Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts in a way. Quasi.
Well, I'm glad I brought it up, just because that makes sense. I didn't really catch that play.
The only thing that I didn't quite get, though, was why that they were swinging their arms. Because the two kids are playing Monopoly, and one of them lands on go, and then the other one rolls, and then somehow they both kind of swing or reaching for something and swing their arm, and that's what knocks the lantern over.
I think it was going for money, because one of the kids landed on the boy. No, the boy landed on a hotel. And so she was excited. I suspect that
she was reaching for the
going
money.
To grab his money, and he was trying to protect his money. That's not as good as your thing justifying the fire, but the mechanics of Monopoly apparently I was really into. Who's gonna win?
They're passing the. I did it too, that when they were rolling the dice, that they were rolling it on a blanket kind of rolled up on the side of the board.
Yeah.
To kind of dampen the sound. I did like that too.
Well, and all the little pieces, again, now mind you, we're jumping back a little, which is fine. The little pieces are all made out of fluffy nonsense, like little hand-knit, handcrafted,
I think one of them was playing with a giant,
little toys.
Yeah, one of them too was using a Cheeto, like a giant, puffy Cheeto, Cheez-It sort of thing, as their game piece.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Which I thought, because I'm like, what are they? Metal. It'll make noise. That's why. So yeah, no. But coming back to, let's say, more from a 10,000 foot altitude, the story itself, the beginning, the middle, and the end. Did it work for you? Did it?
The funny thing is, it worked really well.
Any story problems you really were like, okay, that took me out of the movie?
The only thing that kind of distracted me a little bit was the water going into the basement, because we really don't see pipes being cut or whatever it was that caused the water leak, where the water goes into the basement for the third act. That part seemed like it might have been. It did. There's not a whole lot of wasted
scene missing.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of wasted space here, and because all the cinematography was shot very deliberately, and clearly this is a film that had a smaller budget, you could tell that there wasn't a whole lot of wasted movement with this film, which is kind of nice, because then you're not just shooting a wide shot, a medium shot, and a close-up and trying to fix it in post. Yeah. Then you can have more purposeful cinematography, more purposeful editing. But the water going in right after the third act starts, and that was the one spot where I was kind of like, where's that water coming from? And why is it? Yeah.
I know there are some people in the chat right now. They may be answering that question, but we'll have to wait till the after party to see
it's the old song,
see it.
The after party in the hotel lobby. Yeah.
I wonder if it might be worth watching again, and at a couple of these pinch points, because maybe we did miss something. And this is a huge story strength to this film. It maintains your attention, and you're on tenterhooks so often. You do get an opportunity to relax. When he takes his son to the creek to get the fish out of the traps, and they actually have a moment where they have a chat. That there's a moment of just, okay, we do get to wind down a little here, Everyone, and we actually get a sequence where it goes from those two to mom to the daughter, where we just get to be with them, and we get to see a bit more of their character, you know, and a bit more of what they're emotionally going through. And yeah, you know, a time when it's like, you can't talk. How do you express your feelings?
Well, you know, it was interesting too, because the conversation between
I'm a
father and
loudmouth. Where would I be? I don't know about you, DMG. I'd be fucked. I'd be eaten if I even lasted a day. Let's say I lasted a day. I snore like a bear. I was hooped, gone.
Yeah,
I would not be able to keep my mouth shut.
I've been told that I talk in my
Awake
sleep,
or
so
sleeping.
I wouldn't last more than a day and a half. Yeah, especially, yeah, I you know, like this,
Done
and
for.
then like Army of the Dead. Like, sign me up for the zombie army, because like, yeah, they have numbers on their side, and
I wouldn't
and
even
no
need
human
to
soul
been the-
anymore, so they can do whatever they want.
I wouldn't have even need to been the small child at the beginning playing with the toy. I would have been wandering along and then kind of phased out and started talking to myself.
Yeah, exactly.
Why is everyone looking at me like a freak? I know not. Boom, gone.
Yeah, I mean, best
Oh,
case scenario, I'm the old guy with the beard who just is like, ah, as soon as he makes eye contact with John Krasinski.
Yeah.
Be like, Jim from The Office, why do you have that beard? Ah!
I mean, that said, like, you think about this story. We get 10 minutes on, really, let's say a half an hour, it's an anecdote, strictly setting up the. Damn, this story's solid. I cannot stop praising it. First 10 minutes, just such a wonderful way to get, okay, we got a family. They love each other. They're in a terrible situation. Okay, apparently you got to keep your mouth shut or something's going to happen. And then we see what happens all in that first 10 minutes. And I know what the stakes are. I know what, you know, I may even know what the theme is by then. And then all of a sudden, 2 minutes later, it's like, oh, she's pregnant. Well, now we know. Or it was like 4 minutes later, I think, after that, in what is only a 90-minute movie, including credits. You know, 4 minutes later, we've got our inciting incident. We've got the thing that, yes, we learned she's pregnant, and it's like, ooh, ticking time bomb.
Yeah, and when and it just there's so little wasted space, wasted movement with this film, because, and you're right, the reveals in this film, when you have a thriller, when you have this suspense film, a lot of it is how you manage reveals of characters, of story elements, of, you know, it's the old joke of if you have a gun on the wall in the first act, it needs to come into play in the second act, you know.
Yeah.
And in this case, the toy space shuttle, when you see it on the shelf, then it comes into play in that first act, and then
the rocket he drew, the rocket gag that he drew on how they're going to escape. And then, because the second he says, rocket ship, you can do it, you're like, oh, I know what they're going to do. Like, yeah, efficient, dense filmmaking. But not so dense that you're like, I don't know what's going on. There's too much going on in the frame for me to understand. It's so deceptively simple. Like, it's like, you think about it, it's not like there's a whole bunch of Easter eggs. It's very, as you say, deliberate cinematography, deliberate mise-en-scene. You know, we're only seeing what we need to see in the frame to maintain our focus is very clearly pointed at stuff. It's never wandering around, and yet it all leads to such a tight story where each like, again, yeah, you're right, the water in the basement, I do, I wonder, it's like, did we miss something? But that would be the only, why is there water there? What's going on? Although I gotta admit, maybe it was some kind of emergency thing. If they get water running, it allows quiet everything down. Maybe they're always going to flood it down there, because it was only, it is only like, it wasn't like the location they were living in. Everyone was living somewhere else, weren't they? And this is just like the washing machine place or something.
I believe the washing machine was in the basement of the house.
Yeah.
And then
but I think in that room, though, right, that got all...
well, yeah, the washing machine was in the basement of the house, but where they were was in the basement of the barn, I believe. It was some sort of
some shed thing.
Yeah, it was a separate building where they purposely were building in soundproofing for when the baby's born, so that the aliens don't hear the baby crying, at least ostensibly.
Yeah. And all the hay bales and whatnot they can use to... Yeah.
And I think that, we kind of go back to storytelling, too, as, when you know what story you want to tell, it's a lot easier to say, okay, we don't need to go hardcore into where these aliens are from. Why are they here? We see day 89 at the beginning, and then we see day 472 as markers. We don't hear where they landed.
A couple of anachronistic newspaper covers, newspaper stories. That's it. Nothing.
And I think part of that's point of view too, because we're seeing that from not Jim. We're seeing it from Lee, from John Krasinski's character's point of view. We're seeing it from his point of view, so we don't. We're not getting the President of the United States view where we're moving armies here and all this stuff. If you're a small town farmer and you're the head of a family and you've got your wife and 3 kids, you're not going to have, especially if cable goes out, you're not going to have every news source and all this information.
Your New York newspaper is going to be a tabloid.
Yeah, you're going to be getting those, and that's sort of going to be you're going to be piecing it together on the chalkboard, on the board, and you're going to have articles. So you're going to be piecing it together in the same way that John Krasinski, his character, had to in this film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and again, I think this is back to a feat of storytelling. The more you were to say, explain the aliens, explain how they explain anything like that, the more, well, then I better see more of these aliens. I better, it better be about solving the alien problem. Although there is little hint of that. And again, another quibble on story. It's like, really? It took a year and a half and a little deaf girl with feedback to know. No one else thought of that, even though everyone knew it was the hearing was the thing, that they're super sensitive hearing. No one tried that, not in the entire globe. But quibble.
Well, and we don't know, but they may have somewhere else come up with that, but our story, and that's I think where John Krasinski's
I got to push back a little there. I think that's actually a problem that isn't as important because the story keeps us so well focused.
Yes,
like if
the story that they're telling is really a story about a family and the inner dynamics of all the surviving members of that family.
And that's exactly it. Like this is the part we have to cut the filmmaker slack on. And again, they did such a great job. It's only because I'm watching it at home. I don't know how I would have survived in the theater watching this thing in a dark room with a bunch of people. It would have been like, just because, you can feel tension from others. God, I don't know if I would have made it. Here, I can pause and go to the washroom, and all of a sudden ideas can come into my head and go, that doesn't make any sense. That said, yes, the strength of the story to keep us focused, the strength of all the craft to keep us focused. Yeah, I got to admit, like, this might be the best story I've seen in a while. Although, no, I'm not going to say that. I'm still more impressed. People out there may feel free to make a comment in the chat if you're here live, or down in the comments if you caught this later. I right now I'm still kind of high on Love and Monsters as far as the story and the themes go, but this is got to be a close second for, and number one for tight, number one for efficient, without being lean, without being, well, I could have used some more meat on these bones.
Yeah, and I think when John Krasinski made the decision to tell a family story, so it's the relationship between all four members of the family, where you have, the relationship not just between mom and dad, but relationship between dad and daughter, daughter and brother, brother and dad, and then mom and daughter. When you're looking at all four of those relationships and how they all relate to each other, when you make that and you're going with those family dynamics, and you're building an alien invasion story around that, and we're seeing the postage side stamp of that story, where it's just that family's reaction to a much larger story.
Yeah.
And
I have to say, it's not a much larger story, actually. It's like, I have an excuse to put a family under a great deal of a unique stress. Let's not talk about the aliens any more than we absolutely have to talk about, so that we can put all the focus on a thriller with a family. On the relationship question, which relationship do you think is the primary one? Or do you think all of those interrelationships are equal within this story?
I think the big tension is between father and daughter. And if you notice, there was really only two conversations in the film where they're actually speaking in a normal speaking voice. There's one conversation with father and son when they're out by the river. And if you notice,
the daughter.
And the son asks the dad in a normal voice, why didn't you bring her? Why did you bring me? Why didn't you bring her? And then the son, John Krasinski doesn't answer, and then the son goes, "Is because you blame her for the death." Yeah. And then he doesn't answer, and they cut away, and then they come back to it. So,
and it is interesting, and this may be jumping a little ahead into meaning, or I want to say this now and put a pin to discuss further later. The only other time we're talking about blame is when the mother talks about, my hands were empty, I could have carried them. And
ostensibly right after she gave birth, so she should theoretically be talking about the newborn son, and instead
I got confused. I got confused for a moment. Yeah,
and she just switches mid-sentence, talking about the son she lost.
Yeah,
mid-sentence, midstream.
Yeah. In that scene, you're like, wait, what? Oh, you're talking about Katie, whatever that kid's name was.
I think it was Bo.
Sure.
I
think you're right.
Looking at the IMDb, the son that survived was Marcus, I believe, and the littler kid that was 4.
I don't know.
Was
girl,
Bo.
Boy, mom, dad.
It was the Abbott family, just according to IMDb. But yeah, we never hear their names in this film. It's just mom, dad, daughter, son.
And all the sign language, right? It's all the conversations we're witness to. The vast majority, we don't hear shit. We're always, although I think there was a conflict moment, one of the most powerful moments, and alluding to a key, both a key plot point, but also a key reveal for story and theme, and maybe we're getting close to moving into the meaning, but revealing of character and advancing the plot is when she's just stop. And it's got to be one of the most powerful, or I found it one of the most powerful scenes in the whole movie, is where their conflict has come out into the open, dad and daughter. And it's just so well done. And so, even when she goes to her room, it's like, you can't break anything. You can't throw no tantrums allowed.
Well,
but can you imagine you can't, there's no slamming a door, no fit of pique, everything's kind of, and then you're stuck, and you gotta, better get zen quick. Again, I wouldn't last a day, like you say, a day and a half. I'm like, oh fuck. Well,
and it's tough too because obviously she's a teenager, so you have those any teenager has their frustrations with their parents, and there she is. How she walked into the house. She's about to walk down the stairs into the basement, and one of the jump scares, he kind of grabs her and takes her outside because he doesn't want to see her.
Well, it leads up to the just stop.
Yeah, because and then he's revealing, oh, look at what I've been working on for you, and then we get then we as the audience see how long he's been working at this, trying to not giving up on her cochlear implant, and she's just she's beyond frustrated
because it's an issue of survival for her, and she's like, yeah.
Well, okay, I think she's probably a little crestfallen because how many like if you're the kid, like, oh great, we're trying this again, like how many times do we have to do this and it just fails, and and she's just frustrated.
Well, I think she's frustrated, but it's all about the subtext in that argument. Sure, she's frustrated, but it's more the excuse. It's the excuse. It's all the things that were left unsaid. Like, it's why it has such meaning, I think, which is why I've put up the meaning thing, because I think in some ways, this film is so tight and so well done. There's just not a lot to say. Wow, it's really good. All the performances were wonderful, and they effing were. Like, is there a weak performance in the bunch? I bought the little boy, Noah Jupe, as, more of a, I don't want to, the sensitive kid, as, like just wound too tight, because they've all been wound too tight too long, Yeah.
Yeah, and if you notice in that first 10-minute scene when they're going to the pharmacy, if you notice, he's sick somehow, but he can't walk. Like, he's so sick that we actually see John Krasinski carrying him
back
home from So clearly he was sick enough to where he couldn't walk, they
had to carry him into town.
Yeah, they had to literally carry him, not just figuratively. And then year and a half later, he's probably 10, 12 years old, so he's just trying to find himself, and how do you do all of that?
Well, let's go back to, I think, a key theme in this is guilt. Like, it's a huge, like, everyone's feeling guilty. She's feeling guilty and they're all feeling guilty about that key in that first 10 minutes. What establishes all the tension, all the inter-character tension, is you got a kid who doing what kids do, with his head up his ass. There's a part of me, honestly, I thought, what is this movie about? Don't have kids? That's not a bad message. I mean, I don't mean that, but I gotta admit, like, a reasonable person could go, like myself, going, I don't have kids. At least that's one thing I wouldn't have to worry about in the post-apocalypse. In the zombie apocalypse, is dragging some snot-nosed kid around who's obviously going, but I really want the batteries.
Yeah, and that's, but
but it's guilt. Every player feels guilty.
I think, because you have the son who's not the most confident son anyway, possibly blaming himself because they wouldn't have been at that store. If not,
they wouldn't have gone into the store, except.
Yeah, and then obviously the daughter blames herself, and then the dad obviously blames himself too, and then after
we learn mom
blames herself.
I could have carried him
after giving birth.
I was just so happy to have my, which is so perfectly human. Like, everyone is so, all these things that they're feeling guilty of, or all these things they did. Like, there's times when Jim and I in our Jim and Rob Overanalyze Movies, we talk about this sometimes, where it's sometimes it's like, fuck, that kid should not have survived this long. Why isn't he dead? Here, they almost take that trope of the kid who's forever getting everyone into trouble, because they got their head up their ass the whole film, and somehow they still survive. Here it's almost, I gotta admit, I'm kind of wondering, was Krasinski, when he was writing it, and, or when he was working with those other writers who wrote the story, were they going, no, we're going to show what happens to that irritating little pissant. Wipe them off the map, the first thing, and all the other kids are going to go follow the rules.
Well,
I'm not saying that was a purposeful thing, but at least it didn't play into that trope. And it has so much more meaning. Like, it has so much more impact. You really do get why this family is, together, but they're almost like when they're praying at dinner. They're just hanging on.
Yeah, and when you look at, talking a little bit about gender roles, but I think it kind of goes more to the individual characters. When the son doesn't want to go with the dad to go get fish from the river, from the stream, and the daughter volunteers to go with him because she sees her brother doesn't want to go, and then Dad, John Krasinski, says, no, I don't want you to come with me. Yeah. He needs to come with me.
Yeah.
You could make an argument that is sort of reinforcing gender roles.
I didn't read it that way. I think it was all totally motivated by character and the real tension between the father and daughter. Because look at the very first scene, and she was Daddy's little girl. And he said, the Leatherman thing that she still has, she hasn't thrown out, she knows how to use, that was for her, not the boy. Yeah, I did not read that as a gender thing. I read that all as about, I'm not going on a day trip with her. I don't know how to deal with that. And
I think there was some of that, but I also think if you're in a survival situation like that, and maybe it's the other thing too, is if you're in a survival situation and you're trying to teach a boy to become a man, and he's dealing with a lot of fear, obviously the situation like that, you have to kind of do things to build up his self-confidence. And if you don't have Boy Scouts and if you don't have sports, how else do you build a 10, 12-year-old boy's confidence?
You know what? If they haven't survived this point, I don't think that he's always going to be a timid kid, which is not a bad thing. And I got to push back again, because what was the mother doing but giving Dad the stink eye about, and he's, okay, next time, I'll take her next time. It's like, no, the kid doesn't want it, the boy doesn't want to go. and he's way too twitchy, and the girl wanted to go, obviously still loves her dad, still wants to have that relationship. And again, she's the more competent, notwithstanding the fact that she can't hear, which is a big bummer in this world. I'd still probably say, no, you little girl, I'll have you on the scouting trip. Even if you are giving your little brother toys you shouldn't have. Bet you she learned that lesson.
Well, and then we see later on, she did. That's, when she's gone during the third act.
Yeah. Yeah, no, she, like, I do. So I think one of the key things is guilt, and it's about how that guilt kind of disconnects people. And especially in a world where they all can't speak their feelings, physically, or, like whether it be through words or it's everyone's kind of under this tension because they can't, it's the first time, obviously, Emily, the mom, has expressed her guilt. It's the young girl just doesn't know how to go, please don't blame me, please still love me, that Dad was finally able to say, listen, it's all been about you. I've always loved you, I get it. And that they're all just wrapped in this guilt and trying to that atonement with the father, you know, that great last moment between her, the daughter, and dad before he sacrifices himself. Jeez, I'm getting a little choked up now. It got me in the feels, man.
It did, yeah. That eye contact. I mean, and honestly, too, is there anyone better alive today than connecting with the camera just by staring at a lens than John Krasinski?
Well,
I mean, you get what 8 years, 9 years of it on The Office, and then there he is, just like emoting to the lens directly.
And wow, like, how expressive is American Sign Language? Like, a couple of the best most communicative scenes are when it's literally being spelled out from us in a subtitle, which I gotta admit, I might be thinking about this is definitely reason why subs over dubs. But there we are getting a subtitle, but really it's in the emotion, in the emoting, in the physical emoting, and in what's going on in the face that we're just like, it's you don't necessarily need to speak it. You know, like that was one of the most touching moments when she's pushing back and she's just stop. You know, damn, that's just such a great scene. And interestingly enough, in the dynamic, there he is on his knees as she's looking down on him, you know, which was also a great little weird power switch kind of thing, like where it's almost like he's just begging her to, you know.
Well, and my understanding is that a lot of times when you have a family member who's hearing impaired like that, everyone in the immediate family learns sign language. And oftentimes they will just sort of, it becomes like a second nature thing where people, even when you're talking to other people that can hear, you just sign everything. Yeah. So just doing a little bit of research, the actress in this film that's playing the daughter is hearing impaired in real life. Yeah. So part of me wonders if some of the collaborative nature of filmmaking is, I wonder if she just, John Krasinski and Emily Blunt seeing how she was reacting with her parents on set or her guardian on set, if that sort of informed how they
I thought it was a great plot point. Yeah. Like or not a plot point, a great premise thing. In a way, having a deaf daughter saved their lives, because they all knew sign language before time. She's too old. They all knew it before, and then all of a sudden they're the one of the few families that can communicate over distance. Which is also kind of ironic, because the tension is about the inability to communicate, even though they have this tool at their disposal which allows them to communicate over distance, allows him to say what he needs to say without getting right in each other's face, that they can have that moment where he's like outside the thing's making all kinds of racket. God damn. Fuck, this is a good movie. In the feels.
Yeah,
meaning makes emotion.
Yes, and even in that first 10 minutes, we're seeing that little 4-year-old boy, the youngest son, doing rudimentary sign language. Even so, even at an early age, they're teaching their kids how to sign.
It's the language. It's the lingua franca of the family. Yeah, damn, it was good. And even the one song they did play, it's like, with
it was a nice song.
Vintage iPod. It's like,
yeah, I mean, I wasn't familiar with the song, but it felt like one that fit that scene really well. And probably you're right, one song that they probably have listened to since they were dating many, many years earlier.
Or who knows? Maybe it's just, how much will we? Oh yeah, that's cheap enough. We can afford that. Get those rates. Get that needle drop for us.
they had to save the money for the
non-exclusive,
CGI
worldwide, in perpetuity. Yeah, exactly. Because that thing. Was there anything else we're missing as far as meaning goes? Like, I mean, I think guilt is guilt, and how corrosive that can be to relationships, and how important it is to resolve those things. to repair those connections. Atonement with the father, kind of a classic James Campbell thing going on there. Was there anything else you think that this movie is that is saying, or is, let's say, a meaning currency it's using?
I also think, to a certain extent, parenting and growing up. These kids having to grow up before they really should in modern society. The kid who's afraid, who John Krasinski's going, okay, if something happens to me, he needs to be the man of the house, or he needs to be able to do some of the things that I'm doing, or needs
His
to
big
learn.
sister will take care of that.
Yeah, I need to. Well,
I'm just fucking with you now.
but yes, and then the daughter, who's hearing impaired, needs to also be able to grow up and overcome that. In addition to overcoming being hearing impaired, she needs to be there to help take care of her mom, who's about to give birth. So yeah, these kids that are,
which apparently mom did on her own anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. but for
Dad should have taken the daughter, because that little boy, he would have been attached to her. She would have had support. Should have taken the tomboy. I'm telling you, man.
Well, yeah, for Jim from The Office, he should have taken the tomboy, but the little boy who's scared of his own shadow.
Because he won't jump and scream and attract the bad thing to them, much like he did at the very end.
Because if we reverse those roles,
Dad!
if Emily Blunt steps on the nail going down the stairs, starts giving birth, the alien comes in, all this stuff happens. If that little 10, 12-year-old boy is there and he's afraid of his own shadow already, he probably would have died, because trying to save his mom or
you know what? The kid did okay in a crisis.
Yeah.
She did much better, but the boy did manage to, okay, I know what I got to do. Yeah, I'm not sure this is the Bildungsroman you're telling us here. I'm not sure we really spent that, even the time he spent with his dad out at the creek. In the end, the kid wouldn't do anything, and he had to actually calm him down and take him. And I think that whole sequence is almost like a great lead up, where the kid who, he might be afraid of everything, but he's not emotionally afraid. He's the only one who asks, just straight up, do you blame my sister? Do you blame, he really, on the emotional level, the kid's the one with the guts to actually, you should tell her. She thinks you blame her. She thinks you don't love her, which is the most, I think the kid, if anything, we learn that he's the one who's got the emotional courage that the others don't, even though they're hiding it behind a million things. He's the one who's willing. He is, and I don't mean this, he's his mother's son, as she is her father's daughter. I think, she's the kind of can do.
Yeah, he's sensitive to the mama's boy for sure.
Yeah, and not in a bad way. It's just, I suspect if Dad had survived, they would have had a conversation, kind of going, yeah, we got to stop pushing the boy to do this stuff, because that's never going to be his thing. Sister, come into whatever the kid's name is. Millicent, we'll call her actual name. Yeah, so anyway, something happens to your mother and I. You're going to be, your brother loves you. And you're going to want him around, because every now and then you're going to want to have a truth bomb dropped on you, and he'll do it. But otherwise, he's going to be the home guy, the house husband. You're going to be doing the hunting. That is my theory, and I'm sticking to it, Bryan.
Yes.
What else are we missing? You know what? I think we got to put it on the board at a Bildungsroman, about a family, or about these kids growing up in this environment. What else What else do you think we've got going on here? Or is that, like, it doesn't have to have more. Sometimes just, Jim and I were talking about the movie last week. Sometimes it's as simple as, listen, Daddy's got to go get that $50 million from the zombies to make good with his daughter. Do you need any more meaning? Do you really need any more?
Oh, man. I can't believe you just compared a Zack Snyder movie to this great piece of cinema.
But the point I am trying to make, though, is that do you need any more meaning? Like, sometimes less is more. Like, what more can we pull out of this on a meaning level, on a theme level? I don't know. Like, but is there something you think I'm missing? Something missing? Something we're missing?
I think it's just, it's because it's such a simple story. There's, it's a lot of simple meaning, and a lot of the meaning there is all the relationships between our four main characters. Mm-hmm. And then also the man versus nature, in this case, man versus alien force of nature. Because these aliens are, they look kind of like the alien from Aliens, and they kind of look like a little bit like the aliens.
Got a weird bug claw thing going on there.
Yes, like Starship Troopers a little bit too, and then the little whatever it fills that role of man versus nature, of man versus the force of nature, if you will, at least, because these are not aliens that are talking to each other. They're just sort of, and they're chasing you. It's instinctual. It's not really intellectual.
Perfect alien. We don't really see them until the end. We don't really know much about them other than they're going to kill you, and sound is the trigger.
And look, there's CGI aliens. They did everything else practical in this movie. It's one of the things I like about it. And one of the things that I like about it, sort of like in the same way they did with Godzilla in the 2014 Godzilla movie, Godzilla. It's like, yes, it's a CGI monster, but we're going to show it as little as possible.
Well, and some of that might have been practicals, like just when you just saw the thumping around and that. Here's before we get into, because I think it's such a great movie. It's interesting that sometimes the movie's so short, so tight, so lean and efficient. It's like, what more is there to say about it? I think there is a bit, though, about John Krasinski. There's certainly our final thoughts. But with your permission, before that, I got a couple of announcements to make. Yes, I have announcements. Here, I'm just going to, feel free to catcall. Feel free to heckle, my friend, off the, we can still hear you. Everybody, before we get into that, I do want to make, we do have some announcements. Well, I really have an announcement. The time, and I'll put the date down here. Right now, we're recording this live at May 26, 2021, in 5 days, or 4 days, May 30th, 2021, Central, 9:30 p.m. Central Daylight Time, Universal Coordinated Time -5. We are going to be on the same YouTube channel, folks, exploring Blade Runner 1982, the final cut. Ignore what's on the poster there. We're going to be watching that, or we're going to be taking a deep dive in that and seeing if it holds up. And we even have a guest host, Professor Matt Flisfetter from the University of Winnipeg, who is a bit of an expert on media communications and is a huge fan of both pop culture and this particular movie that he actually wrote a book about called Postmodern Theory and Blade Runner. So anyway, with that out of the way, I think it's time maybe to let's bring back our my co-host here, Bryan. Geez, I cut him off. Bryan, why don't you tell us a bit about your channel, Dragon Movie Guy, and tell us a bit about what you got going on your channel, DMG.
Yeah, so I do a lot of movie reviews, trailer reactions. I'm venturing into a lot more ranking videos. Kind of talking about what are the movies this summer that I'm most excited for. Putting those into rankings. I'm trying to branch out a little bit more into those too. So I'm doing a lot of reactions, ranking videos, some news, movie reviews, a little bit of all of it, and just trying to kind of grow as the channel grows. But yeah, I've been on YouTube for over a year now, and I also do movie reviews with ReviewNation.net. So if you want to see my movie reviews, my written movie reviews on there, I do a lot of movie reviews on there that I don't necessarily do video reviews on, because some of them are for film festivals and the such like that. So I already have a Army of the Dead movie review up on that site on ReviewNation.net. I've got 33 reviews up there now, so you can check me out there as well. But my main site, obviously, is here on YouTube, Dragon Movie Guy. Check out all my videos on there.
And you're at Dragon Movie Guy on both Instagram and Twitter, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes, Instagram and Twitter. I'm most active mainly on YouTube, but I upload all of my videos as well to Instagram on the IGTV part of.
Oh, cool. What would you say? Oh, sorry, man. What are you looking forward to? What do you got coming up? What flicks are you looking forward to?
Well, most immediately, I'm working on a video about Friends. The show Friends. There's tomorrow coming out. There's the on HBO.
Which I'm still wondering who fucking asked for this, but yes, continue.
So Friends was one of the most popular sitcoms of all time. Ran from '94 to 2004. So they recently shot a Friends reunion that was delayed for a few months because of COVID. So Friends : the reunion is airing, or it's not really airing. It's streaming tomorrow on HBO Max. So I figured if there's going to be a Friends reunion, why not do a top 10 list on the best reunions on Friends? So I'm working on that for tomorrow, and then just also I'm also looking forward to doing a couple of videos. I'm going to be releasing a top 10 video of the top 10 movies I'm most looking forward to in June, and then I'm going to try and do those once a month as we go through 2021. Top 10 movies I'm looking forward to in July, August, September, all the way through, and then so
cool.
That's the next couple of weeks.
All right. Okay. Let's move on with the show. And if we've still got anyone in the chat, we are getting to the wrap up, and I would love to hang with you if you're still hanging around. Dude, my friend, does the director pass or fail? This has got to be the easiest mark you've ever given. What do you think?
Yes, this is a great movie. John Krasinski's directing the second one as well. So, obviously a pass.
And he'll have more time to focus on directing because he's not in the cast. Because
he is listed on the cast, and if you watch the trailer, they do like a bit of a flashback.
Yeah.
To the same pharmacy kind of before things fall apart. Yeah. There's a scene in there, but
the before times.
I kind of wonder if he's maybe not dead, because if we're doing horror / suspense, a lot of times, unless you see the character die on camera, he's not really dead. So
yeah,
maybe.
Well, and that leads me to a question: how would you put, what genre is this film in? It's definitely a thriller. I was thrilled and chilled.
Yeah, I would say thriller and suspense would be the biggest thing, and then obviously a little bit of a horror sci-fi in there too with the CGI aliens, but yeah, mostly thriller and suspense.
And this is maybe something for everyone, like just planting a seed here, folks. A while back, saw a hot take, just a just a stupid hot take from a well-established ding-dong. This individual works for a big newspaper, big American newspaper, says something to the effect of Aliens is not a horror film. Or Alien is not a horror film. And I was like, yeah, exactly. It's like, but it's a great thing to say on Twitter. Just this non sequitur, just like that said, one of the things I've always associated with the horror genre is, and this is probably more related to its slasher variants and its ghost variants, right? Those micro genres, the ghost horror or slasher or whatever, that there's a morality. There's a really overt, well, she's a slut, so dead. He's a jock tool rapist. He's going to go. Sometimes it's just overtly racist, depending on the era it comes from. Oh, black guy, he's done. Whereas the Alien, I mean, there may be a bit of greed at the beginning, but a lot of Alien horror is more, what do you do? It's a force of nature. It showed up. So I'm just kind of throwing that out there, not necessarily to discuss right now, but I'm kind of wondering about that. Is the horror more or better when it has some really over-the-top, moral messaging, like kind of cooked into its DNA? Because I don't think there's a moral component to the vast majority of alien horror movies. There may be an evil corporation, like I'm thinking Resident Evil. You may have the obvious douchebag, like in Army of the Dead. It's like, you're a goner, because you're a jerk. But, like, even in Army of the Dead, people don't... a lot of the people who die did not die because of some moral failing. They just, hey, man, sometimes the zombie eats your brain.
Well, and with Army of the Dead, I thought Martin was the character that was the eyes and ears of Bly,
played by the great Garrett Dillahunt.
Yeah, I
hear no bad words about Garrett Dillahunt.
I thought he did a great
television
job.
Performer.
It did the funny thing is that role reminded me a lot of the Paul Reiser role from Aliens.
Oh, that whole movie's a mashup, and now we're getting into a different film, so I am going to cut you off there. Any other final thoughts? Yeah, we're not doing that. I was more just thinking about horror, riffing on horror. Any final thoughts there, my friend? Yeah, I've already pissed. I wasted mine asking about horror genre question. What about you?
My final thought is it'll be really interesting to see where the sequel goes, because the first film was such a good self-enclosed story, and then like any great film, it kind of leaves the door open for a sequel, and in this case, seeing where they take the feedback from the cochlear implant, seeing if that can be the technology that as they widen the world of A Quiet Place, if that can be the technology, the story element that they take from the first film to the second film to make it a bigger landscape, a bigger palette for this story.
Going from Alien to Aliens.
Yeah, going from first film that's self-enclosed to a bigger world.
Yeah.
Like Matrix 1 to Matrix 2 and 3. Different stories, but first film being very self-contained, smaller story, and then in sequels getting bigger and kind of filling out the world in which that first story took place. It'll be interesting to see how that translates from the first film to the second film. And if John Krasinski somehow survived.
Yeah.
I have a feeling he might have.
You know what? Then it's if he survived, it's just another bullshit comic book retcon thing. Then there are no stakes. And the great thing about this film series is stakes. If he survived, then it's like, well, it's not like we didn't see him, the door closed, a la a lot of zombie films where you're like, I won't bore you with the details of a miraculous escape. No, we saw the thing hit him and then, okay. I think on that note, though, it's time for the wrap up. Everyone, if you made it here live, stick around a little longer. Once we cue the credits, we'll open up the green room and we'll have a nice chat. Bryan, thank you so very much for joining us on the second episode of the number 2. I would be remiss, although it's probably a little late, but I would be remiss if I didn't beg all for a like, a subscription, and to ring that bell.
I'm not Jim. I didn't bring a bell.
That's quite all right. That is so much a Jim thing.
We have a silent bell.
Exactly.
We can't have a loud bell. It's a quiet place. So.
Dunk. It'd be like a big plush of a bell. And you'd shake it, and we'd all remember when we could hear bells. Okay. Again, everyone, thanks so much. Thank you, Bryan. Check out his channel link will be in the description. Check out his channel, Dragon Movie Guy, and you can find him at Dragon Movie Guy on Instagram and Twitter. And I think that's about it for now. And I think it's time to cue the credits. I've been in your